And so actually making the kitchen a space where I want to be, and um, sometimes that means I have to clean, and sometimes that means putting on music, and sometimes that means saying, what, dinner's not going to be exactly at 7.
Right.
It might be at 7:50, and you're not going to starve children.
Yes, very important. Oh,
Or you're
Lord.
not going to starve, Derrick.
For me.
So I'm going to create the space and say, there are things that I need to do to tend to myself in this space. So what qualifies me to write about a just kitchen? It's been a surprise companion on this journey, a softer, quieter companion. I don't know if it is a new companion or one whose voice has been strengthened by the process of writing. It is a voice of attentiveness. It draws my attention to the people I am cooking for just as much as the act of cooking. It occasionally snaps me out of my rush to get things on the table, to appreciate the sound of boiling water, the smell of fresh herbs, the feel of a knife against the cutting board. It is a voice that draws my attention away from the fact that I didn't grow the lettuce myself. It takes a second to pray for the hands that did. It is a voice that reminds me that beef is a cow, pork is a pig, and poultry is a chicken, that all of those beings should be honored as they give their lives for ours. It is a reminder that while billionaires own those stores that I'm ashamed to have shopped in, the people working there and shopping there are doing what they can to put food on their own tables, and there is dignity in that. It is a recognition that I am connected to the whole of creation in messy, complicated, beautiful, and surprising ways. My hope is that we can see cooking as a ritual that honors the continuity of life. One thing dies that another might live. We are creatures participating in the acts of creation, and yet we are the only creatures that cook. The lives that are preserved through cooking are ones with the opportunities to speak peace into the world, call out injustice, and make right what is wrong in our broken systems until they too become food for the life that will come after them. My kids are part of the life that comes after me. With every meal I make them, I hope I am nurturing people who will speak truth to power. I hope I am fueling bodies that will stand up for the vulnerable. I hope that when they see me in the kitchen, they are invited into the delight that I feel in getting the opportunity to love them in such a tangible way. I hope that they see my wife and I have tried our best to create a space of welcome and hospitality where all are afforded their due dignity. And I hope they will continue to be people who are uncomfortable with the world as it is and who do the small, incremental things that make it better.
Hello, listeners. I am Jean Kelly, the host of Read, Pray, Write podcast. And I'm taping today at the Wildgoose Festival in Harmony, North Carolina, which I love that name for what this is. And I'm alongside Derrick Weston, who, along with his co-author Anna Woofenden, wrote The Just Kitchen. He's also has several podcasts. Actually, been doing podcasting for very, very long, apparently. But the one I love the most is called Food and Faith. So I'm going to let Derrick introduce himself a little more completely. All yours.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. So my name is Derrick Weston. I am the co-host of the Food and Faith podcast, the host and originator of the Green Lectionary, which is a podcast I get to do for my work at Creation Justice Ministries. I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an educator. I have 4 kids, married.
Excellent. Yeah. Awesome. So just a little more context that when I mentioned Wildgoose Festival, this is a wonderful gathering of Christian creatives of all denominations, backgrounds, professions, orientations. We're all welcome and all are loved. And so this is actually my first time attending, and I'm going to be back. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that. So what has kind of been your favorite moment so far at the Goose, and how many times have you been to this festival?
So this is my third. We came in 2019 when it was at a different location in Hot Springs, and then we missed a couple of years because of the pandemic and life. Then we came back last year, and I'm not necessarily a camping person.
I was, but I'm not. I'm too old for that.
Yeah, same. I'm not necessarily a camping person, but when I come here, yesterday I had the experience of just running into some of my favorite people and just like almost being overstimulated by how many of my favorite people are in one place, like representing the good things that they're doing in the world, talking about the good work that they do, the political activism, the justice seeking, the fighting for inclusion and affirmation, and It's really just the relationships that I've built here. That there's some people that I only see here,
Okay.
and I look forward to reconnecting, and it's become very fully secret.
Right. Yeah, and relationships can be the secret, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I love that too. And I'm making all sorts of new friendships here as a first timer. And I know they're going to extend beyond here. I think that's one of the gifts of the scattering is that it is not a one-off, right?
Yeah.
So I thought we talk a little bit about your book. And again, I like to show it, plug it. Yay. Since we have video, I can do that now. I'm just curious what motivated you to decide to do kind of what you do in the podcast, but in book form. How do you think it benefits readers, or who you're trying to reach?
When I first came on as a host of the podcast, we talked a lot in previous episodes of the show about how food is produced. And we talked about the community that happens at the table. But we didn't talk about what happens in between, food being picked and food being eaten, and with that process of cooking. And even as we were interviewing people for the book, we would so often have to take people and say, okay, can we go back to the kitchen? You got to sit at the table, or you're staying in the garden. Can we go to the kitchen? And we realized that there was some resistance to that, and that there are power dynamics around the kitchen. There are justice issues around the kitchen. And so that's really what the impetus was for writing the book, was thinking about some of that discomfort that people have in even talking about the kitchen and even talking about cooking, and the way it has become just this very tedious thing of, oh my goodness, we have to get something on the table, and one of the worst questions you can ask in most homes is, what's for dinner? because,
Yes.
because we have to think about what are we going to cook again and again and again. Yeah. So wanting to really just kind of explore those questions and how they then connect to our spiritual lives, our lives of faith, and our larger stories about who we are as people.
Right. And so one of the things that I always give as a kind of a branded benefit of spiritual reading. And so we take that reading from Just Kitchen for you to use for your own spiritual reading practice, and we're going to put it into a guided meditation. And so, I always say spiritual reading gives me the pace, space, and grace to go deeper in my life, and how you define some of those words is really individual. But wow, just reading your book, and I began to say, okay, I have changed my pace in the kitchen. I think sometimes we're running so fast and we just start eating to sustain ourselves, and we are missing a space. So I was curious, do you practice any form of spiritual reading in your own spiritual life?
Yeah, actually, I think reading is probably my most consistent spiritual practice. There are some books that I revisit annually. There are some devotionals that I come back to all the time, just to keep myself going. Deep is the Hunger by Howard Thurman is one that I absolutely adore. I read Henri Nouwen's The Wounded Healer annually. I read Jesus and the Disinherited annually. Those are pieces I can come back to and either be reminded of the ways that those readings energized me in the past, or I find something completely new with them. And with Howard Thurman, I feel like the depths of Howard Thurman can't be plumbed. So I will come back to Deep is the Hunger forever.
That's great, because that's one of the things I encourage people to do. Because in my own spiritual reading, sometimes I get, some text that's highly respected, and I read it where I am in that moment in my life, and I don't get it. What? I don't like this book. And then because of just how my own path has gone in a different direction, maybe it's just meant for me that day when I go back to it. So I love that you revisit certain texts, and especially the difficult texts. I always say, okay, if a piece of people you respect have respect for this work or this writer or the spiritual teacher, hey, there is something for you, but it's just not now. It's just not God's timing right now for you to do that. So I love that idea of having maybe certain ones to come back to regularly. So that's great. I wanted you to talk about how you find space to go deeper in your life, and maybe how the kitchen is that space.
cooking can be very mechanical, because one of the ways that we think about cooking is one of the ways we think about food is it's fuel, and like we're machines that need to be plugged in or repowered. Um, and one of the ways that I have found space is to really make my kitchen a space where I want to be. And like sometimes that includes like bringing music in to my cooking. And it's one of the things that I kind of wish I would have written a little bit more about, but we were getting close to deadline.
That's book two.
That's book two. But being able to create the environment in which you want to be in a space, and I think so often we try to force a space to be something that it's not. We try to force a room to be productive when it's actually chaotic. We try to force a space to be like tranquil when it's actually a mess. And so actually making the kitchen a space where I want to be, and sometimes that means I have to clean, and sometimes that means putting on music, and sometimes that means saying what, dinner's not going to be exactly at 7.
Right.
It might be at 7:50. And you're not going to starve children.
Yes, very important.
Or you're not going to starve Derrick.
Right. For me.
So I'm going to create the space and say, there are things that I need to do to tend to myself in this space, and that's not something that comes naturally to me. And so I have to be pretty intentional.
Right. And I'm kind of that same way related to the idea of pace. I have to slow myself down. Because that is that rush to people are hungry and you feel you need to provide for them, or you're hungry and you're just like eating it as you're making it. But I learned that new pace from my husband, who is brilliant because he preps everything ahead of time.
He's one of those guys.
But it is like, here, I've got a little time. I'm going to chop some onions and I'm going to put them in the refrigerator. So when it is time for me, I'm not going to feel rushed. He has to create it. That's what I mean. Like, he has to make it a sacred place. And I think, and also the book has these great opportunities to be mindful again about the source of the food, the hands that brought it from the fields to us. And that's just a beautiful thing that I know I'm going to institute in my regular cooking practice, cooking prayer practice.
Yeah.
Then the other part of that question is, I'm asking people, how do they find or recognize or make room for the grace in their life that goes deeper, helps them go deeper?
That's a hard one for me. I am daily becoming aware of my perfectionism, and realizing how many things that I have in my life stopped doing or didn't even start doing because I didn't think I could do them perfectly. And so part of this for me has been doing things that I don't do well. And cooking is a great space for that. Trying new recipes and jumping into styles of cooking that you might not be familiar with, but being able to like give yourself a space to say, wow, that wasn't perfect. It's okay. And like it's still good enough. I'm going to recognize that no one around me expects perfection. I'm the one expecting perfection from myself. And that piece of grace has also just been something that I admit I am struggling. This is being gracious to myself and recognizing grace in my world is not something that comes naturally to me. And so, but one of the things that I am beginning to learn is that I am pretty good at extending grace to other people. And sometimes I have to begin to say, Derrick, I need you to treat Derrick like someone that you love.
Excellent. I always felt like if I did not do a good job, I'd somehow, the people I was feeding were, I'm helping them somehow less.
Yeah.
But that's a projection of mine onto them, me onto them. And it really kind of made it not a special space and place for me. And so I'm glad to have still been working on it too. I call myself a recovering extreme helper. And then my book is, less helping them, more healing you. It's a process. People.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought we'd give you a chance if there's anything else you'd like to address related to the book or your podcast or your work.
Yeah. One of the things, my day job is at Creation Justice Ministries. We're an organization that helps people of faith think about the ways that we live and better relationship with God's creation. So we're based in DC.
Okay.
We're a national organization though. And for me, food was the on-ramp to that larger conversation about creation, because the things that we eat connect us to the created world, and oftentimes we don't think about the ways that food connects us to the rest of creation. And so, one of the invitations of this book is for people to think, yes, about sourcing, but just think about eating as a relationship to the rest of creation. That we eat other species, and that whether we want to think about it or not, other species are eating us, even as we live and breathe. And that is a part of how we are part of the beautiful earth that God created, and that's a part of the system that God created to eat it. And there's actually something really beautiful.
So, well, in keeping with the pop-up nature of this taping, we were going to keep it brief today, but still such an important and just deep conversation. I so appreciate it. I want to thank my guest, Derrick Weston, and I encourage all of you to check out the Just Kitchen book. So all Read, Pray, Write listeners, I hope you will find the pace, space, and grace you need to go deeper by listening to this reading, to other podcast episodes at www.readpraywrite.com, subscribing to Graceline's newsletter, also available on the podcast website, and sharing all that wisdom you find in your own spiritual reading practice with others in your life. With that, we both pass along all blessings. I'm Jean Kelly.